All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mary Claire Venuto, and I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement at Rutgers University Camden. Thank you all for being with us today, and I hope that you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. We're going to have some fun tonight learning about beer. I'm pleased to welcome you to a virtual tasting of Flying Fish Brewing Company, led by Flying Fish President and Rutgers alumnus Gene Muller and Director of Sales Kirk LaVecchia. Founder of Flying Fish, Gene Muller developed the web's first virtual brewery in 1995 and generated enough media coverage and investor interest to turn Flying Fish into a reality, later becoming the largest of the 80-plus craft breweries in New Jersey. In 2012, Flying Fish opened a 45,000 square foot brewery on 5 acres in Somerdale, New Jersey, with a complete focus on sustainability. Flying Fish has been twice named among New Jersey's 25 fastest growing companies. A former Brewers Association of America board member, Gene has been involved in the industry since 1993. He currently serves on the Brewers Association Government Affairs Committee. He is also on the executive board and serves as treasurer of the New Jersey Craft Brewers Guild, and was one of the leaders of a successful multi-year effort to get new craft beer-friendly legislation passed in New Jersey. He is past chairman of Visit South Jersey, the official organization that promotes tourism from Burlington to Cape May counties, and serves on the board of New Jersey's Conserve Wildlife Foundation. In 2015, he received Drexel University's Alumni Entrepreneur of the Year Award and was named a 2015 South Jersey Entrepreneur of the Year by the Philadelphia Business Journal. In 2016, Gene was named a Rutgers 250 Fellow and a Rutgers Camden Finalist. Gene received a bachelor's degree from Rutgers and a master's from Drexel. He previously held creative positions in marketing and advertising. Kirk LaVecchia is Director of Sales at Flying Fish Brewing Company. He came to the brewery in 2018 after 6 years at South Jersey's Kramer Beverage Beer Distributor as craft brand manager for multiple brands, including Flying Fish. His excitement for craft beer and passion for Flying Fish led to restructuring the sales team, revising sales operations, and adding marketing insights and brand portfolio ideas at the brewery. He says that every day is a fun, welcome challenge at one of New Jersey's legacy craft breweries. Before we get started, if you have any questions for our presenters, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom right of your screen. We'll do our best to accommodate as many questions as possible. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Gene and Kirk.
A little bit of technical difficulty there. So hi, I'm Gene Muller, and welcome to the tasting. It's not quite as exciting as walking through the brewery or being in the tasting room, but we still have beer, so that makes it a good day. And look forward to talking to you about the beers and a little bit about the history of Flying Fish. We've been around since 1996. Next year will be our 25th anniversary. We were in Cherry Hill for the first 16 years, and it's kind of hard to believe now with 110 or 120 breweries in the state, but when we started, people would come to our Cherry Hill location and say, where's the next closest brewery? And we'd be like, okay, 50 miles north to Princeton or 50 miles east to Atlantic City. Now, within maybe a 10 or 15 mile radius of the brewery, there's probably 15 or 20 breweries. So it's really expanded, and it's a great time to be a beer consumer, that's for sure. We moved in here in 2013, and as they said in the intro, we really focused on sustainability. We have 470 solar panels on the roof, provides about 10% of our power. We're one of the most solar friendly breweries in the world, including the big ones. We do a lot of recycling. We have a lot of energy efficiency throughout all our processes, and it's really big importance to us, and it's at the center of focus. So I think what we're going to do, rather than me just talking a bit, is Kirk's going to lead us through the tasting. Since we have 5 beers in an hour, you don't have to finish them all, but we'll kind of go through a beer and then in between take questions and talk about whatever you want to talk about. But I think most important thing is to get that first beer opened. So Kirk, you want to take it?
All right, yeah, I have the fun part of the presentation where I get to work you through drinking out of our variety 15 pack. So this is brand new from us for really started out in February of this year of 2020, but we had introduced 15 packs at the brewery last year in 2019. So innovative package. There's not a lot of local breweries who are doing these. And it's really unique because we just added a canning line in 2018. So it helps us showcase not only our brands and our pack types, but a lot of the new innovation that we've been driving. So I'm not going to go luck of the draw. I'm going to actually systematically pick these ones out. So we're going to start off with what I think is one of our lightest styles of beer, which was actually just named by South Jersey Magazine the 2020 best beer of the summer. So we just got that news today. So very exciting. This is our Salton Sea. It's a session sour. And you go, well, what is even a session sour? Session sour just means it's light and tart to be refreshing, much like lemonade is. And this beer, which I'm going to crack open right now. So if you have your 15 pack or you have your beer with you, you can start opening up your Salton Sea. This one is actually brewed with strawberry and lime, and there has kind of a fun backstory. When this beer was getting created, and you actually can see it in the art, is originally this was a pilot batch that we made here in the brewery on a very, very small system, roughly about a 1 or 1.5 barrel system, which just gives you a couple of kegs to put it in perspective. It was made with actual saltwater taffy from the New Jersey shore. So that would have been extremely labor intensive to make this as a summer seasonal and unwrap all that taffy. We actually went through a process of trying to find a taffy supplier who could sell us bulk taffy to try to attempt this. But we found out that just using strawberry and lime naturally was a better alternative. So this is 4.3% alcohol, very, very light, refreshing. It has flavor combinations. So why don't we take a sip of this? You can see really, really light straw golden color. To me, the aroma is that lime. Lime is a very overpowering flavor and aroma, and it also lends itself to a lot of refreshment. And when people think about the beach, they think about a lot of different drinks and cocktails and things that are made with strawberry and lime, your daiquiris, your margaritas, those kind of things. So this is very reminiscent to me of that great beach vibe. And the fact that it's low in alcohol at 4.3 allows you to consume more without having to necessarily worry about any of the kind of like higher ABV issues that come into some other brands. So yeah, really light summer easy drinking beer is what Salton Sea is about. And we actually made a variety 15 pack with 2 different flavor combos. There was a blackberry kiwi and a pineapple mango version of this as well that we did a limited 15 pack run of for the summertime. It's still out and available in stores. So if you like the Salton Sea and you want to try 2 different fruit flavor forward beers, you can actually still grab that right now because it's still the summertime. But yeah, so Salton Sea. And this has been one of our larger driving forces. This is a year-round product for us. So even though it's in our core variety pack and it's in that summer seasonal pack, you can get this year-round. So if you really, really like it, don't worry, it's not going anywhere. Even though it was rated top beer of the summer by South Jersey Magazine, it's a year-round product for us, so you can consume it all year round. Gene, anything you want to add to it?
It's a darn good beer, and I'm not usually a big fan of the fruit flavored beers, but it's perfect with this 90-degree weather and the humidity. It is just a really easy drinking summer beer, and yeah.
To me, there's a common term in the industry, lawnmower beer. So imagine cutting the grass. It's super, super hot on the weekends, and you just need something to quench your thirst immediately. That little snap of tartness, which I had mentioned, gives you that kind of lemonade vibe. This beer is perfect for just refreshment in the summertime to cut that heat. That citrus really kind of adds that layer. And then as you drink, you'll actually be able to notice more and more of the strawberry. So kind of interesting. So we ready to move on? Not trying to make this a power hour or anything, but let's get into the next beer. Let's continue down this fruit path. And this one actually is a summer seasonal. This is our Tradewinds Tropical Wheat. It's brewed with passion fruit and guava puree, so all natural fruit goes into this. Let's get this into a glass. 5.3% alcohol. The first two beers, so the Salton Sea and this Tradewinds, they're all about flavor and aroma and not really much about hops. In beer, we talk about there's a lot of different ingredients in beer. You can add a lot of different fermentables in it, but mainly it's water, it's hops, and malt, and yeast. But for the first two beers, the hops, which are really the bittering component, but they do add flavor and aroma, they really kind of take a backseat because the fruit is really what we wanted to shine in this beer. So Tradewinds Tropical Wheat, passion fruit, and guava. Let's smell and taste it. Again, another really, really light colored beer. When we served this beer, it started out as a limited 4-pack 16-ounce can in 2019. We brought it to the Atlantic City Beer Fest, which is the second largest beer fest in the entire country. Happens in Atlantic City annually. It got pushed back, unfortunately, due to COVID this year. But Tradewinds made a debut as a limited beer and a limited offering, and was utilized and sampled to just under 27,000 attendees of that festival. And the thing that people would constantly come up and ask us was for the Gatorade, which they thought Salton Sea tasted a lot like Gatorade, and for this one, Hawaiian Punch. And to me, I get exactly where they're coming from. It just screams that tropical fruit vibe, very relaxed, low key, another beach summery. I mean, you can see by the sunset and the packaging. And normally I'd be drinking out of the cans, but I want you to see how light and color these beers are, purposefully so, so that the malt really kind of takes a backseat to that fruit forward. So
I think another point of this beer too is it's made with wheat, and wheat gives a real cleanness and crispness to the character of the beer, which really helps amplify the all the tropical flavors.
Yeah, and we use a substantial amount of fruit, so much so that when we first brewed this, we were getting extra quantities out because all of that puree was just adding volume in the tank. So we were shocked when we were getting excess amounts of both kegs and cans when it first came out. But it makes sense because this isn't an extract beer. This uses all fruit puree in it, and it adds a substantial amount. But you can, to me, the fruit flavors really shine using something all natural. And we have to use a lot of it in here so that you really get those flavors and aromas. So, but yeah, that is Tradewinds Tropical Wheat.
Great. We have 2 questions here.
Yeah, shoot.
The first one is why did you name it Flying Fish, and what is a virtual brewery? It's kind of funny that this has gone full circle here.
Yeah, Gene, you're going to have to take both these.
Well, first thing, virtual brewery is that there was this brand new thing called the World Wide Web back then. And, I discovered it and got some friends to help put together a website. And I learned some basic HTML programming. And we were trying to raise funds, and we couldn't. People would say to me, well, okay, you haven't run a business, you haven't worked in a brewery, and you haven't brewed, and you want me to give money for your invest in your company. I said, that's right. And that didn't go very well. So I got the idea of I kind of called it This Old House Meets the World Wide Web. So it was a blog before there were blogs. I would talk about different things like, bottles or flooring or just the whole process of where we're putting the brewery together. And so we really only existed in space. And it's kind of hard to think back then. There was no Amazon, there was no Google, there was no spam. It was a really primitive place. And actually, I sent out, when we rolled out the website, I sent out press releases to the media. And like the Philadelphia Inquirer at the time didn't have internet access. So the reporter came to my house. I'm there on my kitchen counter with my old Apple laptop saying, this is what the World Wide Web is, and here's the Flying Fish. So it's, there wasn't Google, but whatever it was, Alta Vista or the search engine, if you put in brewery, you'd probably get, 12 hits. Now there's probably 12 billion. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And that was just kind of being at the right place at the right time. As for the name, we try to come up with a backstory. The real truth of it is that, you know, no one was waiting for South Jersey beer, or and we joke that, you know, we don't have mountains in South Jersey. All the good animal names were taken, so we came up with Flying Fish. But we really wanted to do something that was just, you know, fun, had a little bit of an attitude. If you see our logo, it's got the skeleton fish with the propellers. Just have fun with it, and you know, stand out. Because at the time, people were like, they didn't really get local brewery. It's like, if it's local, how come it's not cheaper? And you know, now it's local's a big thing, but it was just kind of a way to help us stand out on the shelf. Because again, it was completely, you know, if you went to a bar when we first opened and it was a Sam Adams and a Flying Fish on tap, or Sierra Nevada and a Flying Fish on tap, that was a South Jersey beer bar. And you know, now you've got the Yard House in Morristown that has 100 taps. You've got, you know, seeing somebody with 30 or 40 local taps is not unusual anymore.
Great, thank you. We are getting a lot of questions in now. Do you use honey in any of your beers?
We use a lot of honey in one beer specifically. It was from the holdover from the Exit series when we did beers for each stop of the turnpike. And Exit 3 was a blueberry braggot, which is an ancient, I think it's from the 11th century, where they would make a honey mead and beer and blend the two. So this beer comes in at 15% in a 12-ounce bottle. So that's basically 3 standard beers in one bottle of beer. But you don't know that. People try it, and then you tell them how strong it is, and they're stunned. Or maybe they're stunned because it's 15%. But it's the honey gives it a really light character. We'll usually occasionally use it in other beers, but that's the big one that we use honey in.
Yeah, honey is actually really interesting as an ingredient in beer as well, because for the most part, we have a perception of what honey tastes like because we add it into tea or you use it as an additive for other foods. So it has a distinct flavor and aroma. Honey, when you add it into a fermentable product like beer, almost ferments completely clean. So you actually don't get a lot of that sweetness unless the fermentation process kind of stalls a little bit. So it's unique because it's not really an overly sweet beer, even though it's 15%, which means that we have to start out with a large amount of fermentable sugars in the beginning part of fermentation. It does not end with like this really, really overly cloyingly sweet vibe. And that beer, Braggot, is incredible when it's in a bourbon barrel. I think that rounds out the blueberry and that extra ABV.
Great, thank you. I'm going to ask one more question and then we can keep rolling. This is exciting. We have somebody viewing from California. So they want to know, do you have anything in the works for a watermelon flavor? She's in California and familiar with 21 Amendments, Hell or High Watermelon. Setting you up for a next one?
Yeah, do you want me to take this, Gene?
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, you're more familiar with it.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard to see necessarily on here, but this is a beer collaboration that we've done with the New Jersey State Aquarium. So the Adventure Aquarium, this is a cup. You can actually get this beer on draft coming soon, but we did this for them last year. They didn't open because of COVID this year until just recently. So this will be back as a draft product, but it was a 16-ounce 4-pack can. And we took our base beer, the Salton Sea, but rather than adding strawberry and lime to it, we actually added watermelon puree. So that's why all the coloration is watermelon. Now, this hasn't hit any kind of national or large core demographic, but yeah, I got a lot of those watermelon, like big Jolly Rancher kind of vibes off of this. We called it a hippo beer because Jenny and Button are the 2 hippos that they have at the Adventure Aquarium. And there was a big press release and they actually fed the hippos watermelon. It's one of their favorite foods. But a really, really cool collaboration that we did with the aquarium was called Watermelon Splash, because that's what the watermelons do when they throw them into the tank.
All right, do you want to take another question now?
Shoot, yeah.
Okay. So, our audience member said, I know that you mentioned you use saltwater taffy from the shore for Salton Sea. What other ways do you keep Jersey in your beers, especially since you've been able to expand your distribution to other states?
Well, so originally when we created this beer, it had the saltwater taffy in it. We actually reached out to Frailingers and a couple other folks to try to get saltwater taffy to start it, but we found out it was just way too cumbersome and actually really challenging in the brew house to work with taffy on such a large 150 barrel batch size. So this one just uses strawberry and lime, no actual taffy in it. I mean, obviously the call out, this speaks actually on the copy. Memories are made by the sea. We talk about boardwalks, invoking these great flavor memories and saltwater taffy. We try to still maintain our semblance of who we are as a state and where we've come from. But we've kind of moved away a little bit from some of the exit series, which I think the exit series, and Gene, I think you can tell a really funny story about the state of New Jersey. But that was probably our biggest testament to calling out New Jersey and being South Jersey. We've expanded. We've actually added some territory in states. We just recently went into West Virginia last year. So for us, having a look that's a little bit more national and less localized was important, but we still have a lot of those roots intact. But the exit series, I think, screams New Jersey, and we had a little bit of trouble with the law.
Well, there are a couple. We're going to probably revisit the Exit 7, which is the pork roll porter, using the Taylor pork roll at some point. Exit 1, we used oyster stout. We would go down to the Bayshore and bivalve and pick them up fresh, put them in the brew kettle. And the best thing about that is you put them in the brew kettle the last 10 minutes, and then you pull them out, and they are just perfect for eating. It's like the brewers line up as they come out of the kettle. But yeah, so we still do. We use New Jersey honey for the braggot. There's a lot of things when we have an opportunity. The thing is to, New Jersey's not really known as a barley growing state or for hops. And when you're a production brewery, you really want a steady, consistent supply so that we've tried hops from local growers, but you want to have, that consistency. So when the consumer buys the beer and says, oh, wait, this hop fish is totally different from last time, that, that's not a good thing. So we really want to kind of focus on the consistency. But when we do special beers, we're always looking for local ingredients.
Great. So somebody wanted
I'm
to
getting
know.
thirsty.
Oh, somebody wanted to know, aside from Flying Fish, what are your 3 favorite New Jersey breweries for both of you?
That's a loaded question.
You have to stop
we work
recording
in
at this
selling
point.
Flying Fish, right?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. I don't get out to a lot of the North Jersey breweries. There's so many small ones that you don't distribute, so it's really hard to try their beers. But some of the other ones that distribute, I think Kane Brewing up in Ocean County does a pretty good job. A little smaller guy, Magnify, up north, does a really good job. There too, that you can kind of find out and about. But there's just in New Jersey, so many of them are kind of storefront. They don't really distribute that well, so it's hard to try them. And you get to the point where if you've been in a brewery all week and you get the weekend off, it's like, let's go to a brewery. It's especially what's going on right now makes it really difficult. But there's a lot of good new young breweries coming up, and some good beers out there.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. I really don't drink anybody's products in New Jersey apart from our own. And it's not to say that in a previous life when I was at Kramer, I drank everything under the sun. A part of it was I was part of portfolio procurement. So attracting new brands, like, for example, when Bell's came into the state, that was my opportunity to potentially bring that into Kramer's house. And we signed New Belgium when I was there. That was a big acquisition for us. So I'm well versed in a lot of brands, but I've really, since we've been here, we've changed and adapted. And really, when I look at our lineup of beers, there's really only 3 or 4 that have been in existence more than 2 years. So when I think about new innovation, I am less inclined to try new breweries and more inclined to tinker around with what we have going on here and new brands that we're launching. So that's kind of like where my excitement level lies, is because we're always designing something new here. So I always get to like kind of like scratch that itch of needing to try something new, which was my biggest thing when I got into Untapped probably about 6 years ago. It was always about ticking off the latest beer, the newest trend. That's not to say that we don't pay attention to industry data or think with our portfolio selection what is important to our consumers. Because at the end of the day, we make beer for people, and we want to be proud of the products that we make and enjoy. But we really want you guys to like them, because otherwise we don't exist. So that's been our paramount, is to shape and identify some flavors and aromas, things that we don't have in our portfolio existing, that would elevate us as an internal brand at Flying Fish.
Great, thank you. Should we crack open number 3?
Yes. Let's go to daylight savings. So there actually is a category in the beer world that's called, or even alcohol in general, it's called better for you category. So this would fall into that better for you category, because with people wanting to have healthy, active lifestyles, it's important to think about carbs. It's important to think about calories. It's important to think about even ABV. So this one is lower on all of those categories. So it's only 110 calories. It uses a super fruit in it called acai. And it's very, very light, being low in ABV. And even to me, the flavor is very fruity. It almost reminds me of like Fruity Pebbles in a sense, and that little bit of cereal that you get, but it's extremely light. And a lot of people really like this beer because they can have a couple of them. And once again, it's not hurting your waistline. It's better for you than your average craft beer. And especially the kind of rule of thumb is the higher the ABV, the higher the calories typically. So, but for there wasn't really anything in the space that we thought was really great when it came to low ABV, low calorie IPA. So we wanted to develop one. And to continue that on, we decided to fruit ours, which nobody was doing in that space as well. And we've had a lot of success with our fruited beers. So Daylight, this thing is our lightest beer that we make, both in color and even in like texture. It's not very heavy, but there is some mouthfeel in there as well. But to me, that acai just, it comes right at you. It's got really nice deep, if you've never had that fruit before, it kind of has like a blueberry, blackberry, boysenberry kind of vibe, but finishes very clean, very crisp, very dry, and there's not a lot of aftertaste, which adds to the drinkability of the product, because it's just, the beer is super easy to drink, and at 4%, it's okay to have 2 or 3, not a big deal, and the calories are low.
So we had got another question in. Is there a particular beer in this variety pack that serves as the best seller, even if it's just for the summer season?
Yeah, so our best-selling beer right now, currently, we haven't gotten to it. This is actually how we're going to close out the tasting, is our Hazy Bones. So when a standalone 6-pack, this is a core beer. You can get it year-round from us. But right now in the industry, hazy, juicy anything sells, and particularly hazy, juicy IPAs. IPA is still the #1 selling category for beer as a whole, and ours is unfiltered, has tons of tropical fruit notes, has that nice mouthfeel, which is a little bit more filling, purposefully so to give you some texture, and it's just extremely drinkable. So this has surpassed everything that we carry in a standalone product. Even our most popular product for years and years and years was Hopfish. So Hazy Bones just overtook Hopfish in the past couple of months. So this launched in January of 2020. So brand new beer, but this is our most, just based on volume, this is our most popular. But once again, like, all of this stuff is so subjective. If you're drinking through this and you realize that there's one beer that you particularly like, no one's right or wrong. Your palate is your own, and everyone's palates are so unique. So I always, people always ask me like, what's your favorite? Well, my favorite really doesn't matter because it might not be what you're into. So I always kind of try to ask like, what kind of flavor things are you looking for from beer? Or what are other brands that you like or enjoy? And then we try to match it to make sure that you're happy with what you're actually drinking. But with that side note, I did pour myself extra daylight because I do drink this beer a lot.
Can you talk a little bit about the sustainability efforts? Particularly, do you source water from a certain area?
Could you repeat the question here?
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about the sustainability efforts? For example, do you source water from a certain area?
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, I mentioned the solar panels. We also have a super energy efficient boiler. So we do all our heating and most of our sanitizing with hot water. And normally a plant this size, you'd have 1,000-gallon boiler where you're just constantly heating up that water. This one is 60 gallons and it'll go from a cold boiler to high pressure steam in about 15 minutes. So you're really not, it's kind of like a high efficiency hot water heater for the home. It really doesn't come on until you start drawing on it. So that's one thing. Our brew house is not only energy efficient, but when we don't vent anything to atmosphere, so there's no steam coming out off the roof. We have, if you come to the brewery back next when we're able to do tours again, we have stacks, but it's because it's a German system and the Germans are traditionalists, so they put these stacks there. They don't really do anything. We recapture all the steam. So for every 5 gallons of beer we make, we capture a gallon of hot water that would have evaporated as steam. So we're able to reuse that heat energy, also reuse that water. Some other things, we have a couple of rain gardens, so we recapture some of that water. If you've been to our brewery, our street, we're kind of on the one side of Route 30, and there are no storm drains. So we're kind of the bottom of the funnel. So all the rainwater comes shooting down our street, goes into Cooper Creek, which goes into the Cooper River, which goes into the Delaware, which goes into the ocean. So we're trying to stop some of that water. There's a lot of bank erosion. So we're trying to mitigate, at least doing our part, stopping some of that water from, flushing all kinds of stuff out into the watershed. So there are a lot of other energy efficient lighting and glass. And if anyone has a business in New Jersey, I highly recommend the state will pay when you upgrade your heating. They will pay 80% of the cost, including installation, if you replace a standard system with energy efficient equipment. And now we started with energy efficient fluorescent lights. Now we can upgrade to LEDs because the technology is getting so much better. So just looking at a lot of things like that wherever we can. We had to put a new roof on because of the solar panels, so we doubled the amount of insulation so it would reduce our heating and cooling costs. Just made the investment up front, and then down the road it's really paying dividends for us and for the planet as well.
That's great, thank you. We got another audience question. Who comes up with your beer name? They are wonderful.
So beer names, I guess you have to ask, the origins of some of the earlier beer names. Gene, I think you have to talk about some of the original beers that you were making, and even the cease and desist from one of your favorite bands. I think that's a good story. But a lot of our newer products, we sit around at a table and we just chat with each other openly. It's a combination of brewing, production, sales, marketing, ownership. Everybody tries to kind of facilitate some ideas and some input. And honestly, it's somebody usually just sparks a really good idea, and we have 30, 40 names down written. And sometimes it's actually the design of the beer itself that kind of lends itself to what the look would be. I remember we went through a lot, and we knew we wanted to use C in the name for Salt and Sea, but we couldn't figure out how to do it, sea glass, but it was going in a can, so that didn't make sense. Sea foam kind of maybe could work, but we didn't want to sound like Sea Quench, which is from Dogfish Head. So that's where Salt and Sea came from, is the Saltwater Taffy origin, and then obviously Memories by the Sea. So yeah, we kind of all collaborate together on names, but I love our origin names too, because we have a lot of good history here.
Yeah, Kirk's referencing our IPA, the Hopfish, when that came out. I knew we weren't going to ever. It was originally a draft beer, and I knew we weren't going to be able to, release it as a label on a bottle. But we spelled it Hopfish, PH, like the band. They weren't quite as big at the time, so when we do festivals, people would come up and say, "Could I have the Hopish?" or "Could I have the Hopish?" That's one of my favorites. But then we put it out. It got out and about as that darn internet started to take over the world, and we got a call from their attorney, who's actually, he said, I'm an attorney, but I really want to be the archivist, and he still is. But it was pretty cordial call, just like, "Hey, could you stop doing this?" And we're like, "Sure, we knew," and not a problem. But yeah, some of the early beers, the Exit series was just, people were always, early on, it was so different. Like you would hear, "Oh, I had this beer made in Colorado," or "I had this beer made in Oregon," and you have a sense of what that is in your head. And then you would hear, "Oh, I had this beer made in New Jersey," and it's kind of like the needle scratching across the record. Fortunately, that's changed, but at the time we said, "Okay, well, let's celebrate." People are always talking crap on New Jersey. It's like, let's celebrate New Jersey. So we came up with the Exit series because, people, especially in South Jersey where we are, really don't use the numbers, but the rest of the world knows New Jersey as the Exits. So we said, let's do that and celebrate it. And of course, the first one came out, and this was not a cordial cease and desist. We got a nasty gram from the Turnpike Authority to say, "Stop using, Exits." And so I researched it, and all those attorneys they never bothered to trademark anything except for the shape of the Turnpike sign that has that little corner cut out. So we came to the agreement that as long as we didn't say New Jersey Turnpike, we were allowed to use Exits. So I had to put in a little disclaimer saying we're not affiliated with the Turnpike Commission, and they're not affiliated with us, and we're not affiliated with them. So when they raise tolls again, please don't come to us. And just kind of went from there. But that was a really fun beer. And then one more early one after the Superstorm Sandy, we wanted to do a fundraising thing. So we worked with our wholesalers, some retailers, came up, and we developed this beer called Forever Unloved Sandy, which we abbreviated to FU Sandy. And we were able to donate like $750,000 over the years directly to a lot of people on the ground doing the rebuilding. And it was all the profits from selling these beers. We did it over a course of a couple of years. An interesting side note is we were selling merchandise too. And we got a couple of people who said, "Oh man, I love these hats. My ex-wife is named Sandy." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever. We made the sale. We'll sell you how many you want." But yeah, it's a fun industry, and you really want to have fun with it.
Great. Follow-up question for Eugene. How did you get into the brewery business?
Well, I had a job where I worked 40 hours a week and had 4 weeks vacation, and um, decided I was bored with that. So at the time I was doing home brewing. I actually wanted to learn how to make wine. I was really getting into wine, and then I started researching, and it's like, wow, when you make wine, it takes you months before you find out if you screwed up. I'm like, oh, beer's only 2 weeks. That's perfect. So I got pretty good at it. Actually, I won the first when New Jersey finally legalized home brewing in, I guess, the early 90s. I won the best of show for the first ever legal um, competition, but I had been brewing for years before that. So I decided I wanted to get in the brewing industry and went to brewing school out in Siebel in Chicago. It's the oldest, school in the country for brewing. And then, one thing led to another, and I started the brewery. So I went from working 40 hours a week to 70 or 80, and occasionally getting a few days off. But Yeah, it's a lifestyle business. It's, I have a lot of great friends in the industry and, meet our customers that come in. It's a shame the tasting room's kind of closed down now, but it was always great to just interact with your customer over a beer. I mean, what's better than that?
Great, thank you. Should we move on to the fourth beer? I don't want anybody's beer to get warm.
Yeah, we can do that. So the fourth beer we're going to do, this is our XPA. So talking about names, the reason why this is called XPA is we used to make a beer that was called Extra Pale Ale. In fact, Gene, that was your very first beer?
Yeah, it's the first beer we made.
So very first beer that we ever made, still a perennial favorite, but just needed some tweaking and some updating. So we updated the graphics and completely reformulated the recipe to bring the Citra hop to focus. So that is our XPA. The reason why it's called XPA is Extra Pale Ale. So it's a throwback and homage to the beer that started the brewery. And this one, we're now going to start seeing zero fruit actually added into the beer, but instead the hops are going to denote a lot of the flavors and aromas. So this one uses big time Citra, but there's also some Palisade, some El Dorado, some Warrior in there. All the flavors and aromas are coming from hops, one of the key ingredients in beer. And to me, I mean, you look at the can and it just screams citrus. And most people, average consumers, it says Citra Pale Ale right there, but most consumers will just say, like, give me the citrus. And they're not entirely wrong, because when you look at the label, this does, to me, have a lot of that bright orange, a little bit of lemon zest kind of vibe in it. And it's, once again, very crisp, very clean, which is kind of indicative of all of our beers, is we try to make them more drinkable and have a really clean finish. Do you want to talk about maybe the origin of just Extra Pale Ale in general? Like, how did you come up with that recipe? Because that was one that you designed, correct, Gene?
No, I worked with our original brewers, but yeah, we came into the market. It was just not a hoppy West Coast pale ale like a Sierra Nevada at the time. The New Jersey beer market it's kind of interesting. Philadelphia had this really vibrant, thriving beer scene with a lot of great beer bars. And I told you, New Jersey at the time, if you had Sierra Nevada and Sam Adams on tap, that was considered a beer bar. And where we were, it was easy for consumers just to go over to Philadelphia if they couldn't find the beer they wanted. So we decided to make something that wasn't quite as hoppy and didn't kind of blow people's palates out. Excuse me, and came up with this. Still, when we started, we didn't do a clean filter at the time, so there was just a little bit of haze, and we had bars calling us saying there's something wrong with this beer. Now it's people are like, how come this beer isn't hazy enough? But yeah, it was our biggest seller for the longest time. It was the biggest seller. We were the first craft beer to get into at the Phillies. We were at the old Veteran Stadium to start with, and then now we're at the Citizens Bank. But for years, that was the biggest selling beer there. It's just a great all around 5% alcohol beer. So something that's, great if you're going to have a couple on the back deck, or if you're going to pair it with food. It really is kind of a workhorse, and you can use it for a lot of things.
So we have a couple more questions in. One question, do you still make a Rutgers beer, Exit 9 Hoppy Scarlet beer?
Well, we brought that back once. We turned it into Redfish. The thing with Exit 9 is that it was also 9% alcohol, which is kind of hard in a day-to-day beer if you have a six-pack of that. So we kind of brought it back down to about 7. Unfortunately, that was kind of a West Coast drier hopped beer, which is not what consumers are looking for right now. So we've kind of sidelined that for the time being. We always have on the drawing table that we may resurrect a couple of the exits at some point, so that may be in the cards maybe for our 25th anniversary. But we don't have anything in our lineup now that matches that.
Thank you. There's a comment. It says,
Oh, actually, can I interject one more funny comment about that? So when we came up with that, we were originally going to call the beer Scarlet Fever, and we had to get all our labels and wording approved by the feds. And they kicked that back and said Scarlet Fever implies that somebody can either get or get cured of the disease if they drink that. We're like, why would someone want to give himself Scarlet Fever? But so then it became uh, Exit Night and then Hoppy Scarlet.
That's a great story. Someone says, Gene and Kirk, thank you for the virtual tasting. This is a fantastic variety pack.
Well, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Next comment from Jim. There is a question about the brewing process. How long does the creation of a new beer take from inception to shelf?
Well, Kirk can address, I can address the production, Kirk can address the other piece of it. So, coming up for the idea for a beer, you can do that. We have a pretty good brew team, so they kind of know how the equipment works. We know our ingredients. We may order some different hops and try them. Sometimes we do a pilot brew. Other times we just go right to a full batch, which is 50 barrels, which is, 100 kegs. That's a lot of beer, 600 cases. So that process is really from start to finish for a standard ale is about 2 weeks. Where it gets complicated is all the packaging has to get designed and approved. Like I said, all our labels have to go through the feds, and sometimes that can take up to 30 working days to get that approved. And then also we have, we work with wholesalers, so Kirk can address how, there's a timeline for that as well.
Yeah, so like any good question, usually the answer is depends, right? So for us, when we're coming up with new innovation, sometimes that can take weeks, months, or for example, even in we're not drinking it, but our simple hard seltzer, we wanted to come out with this in 2019. It took us an extra, probably about 9 months to really figure out how to make one clear, clean, and all the nutritional levels that we wanted it to be at. So, but once everything, all nuts and bolts are together, all the approvals are in process from a wholesale standpoint, they need approvals. Typically, it's roughly about 15 days prior to the state. So we have to submit to not only the New Jersey state for our own internal pricing, but then for our wholesalers pricing by the 15th of the month. But there's a couple more hoops to jump through in terms of just SKU rationalization. The beer business is really unique in the sense that you can be as creative as you want and you can add as many different additives as you want, but you still have, when you work with a wholesale network, there still are some challenges in terms of how many offerings can you give them that they can functionally sell in an appropriate amount of time to either A, keep it fresh, or B, keep it relevant and not just like noise. So we're very cognizant of that when we're making decisions on what types of brands, what pack types to sell, what price points they're at. So you kind of wrap all those things together. In a perfect world, it's a couple of months, but we typically will sit down as an organization and in June and July and decide what our lineup and what kind of beers we want to make for the following year. So we already made a lot of those decisions for 2021 with maybe a couple of curveballs to keep things interesting. But yeah, it takes time and process because you have to get the artwork right, you have to get all the approvals, and then legally be able to sell it. And then once it gets to our wholesalers, they have to get it out into retail for you so that you can actually enjoy it and consume it. It's a lot easier if you just come here and buy it.
Well, that's the funny thing about the beer industry is the beer is the easiest part. It's all the other stuff and the regulatory stuff that's the work.
Great. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. Let's crack into that last beer with a couple more questions as well.
All right. So Hazy Bones, it's our number one selling beer that we make right now. It is a hazy, juicy IPA. Hazy means that it's unfiltered. So there's some residual, both hop matter as well as yeast particulate that comes out of this beer. And that's become also synonymous. This unfiltered look has become synonymous with quality. which is interesting because Gene had mentioned this earlier, that when you first started making beer, if it looked like that,
Oh
people
yeah,
would tell
we'd
you
be
it's bad.
thrown out.
Yeah, it's bad beer. And now, if it's not this type of clarity, then it's bad beer. It's like just so funny how ebbs and flows of consumer preference. But we have to follow what's important to our consumers. So that's why we developed this brand, which is super bright. I know we say tropical a lot, but that's really what the consumers are looking for, is big pineapple, big mango type flavors. And this beer gets both dry hopped, and we also do a process that's called biotransformation hopping. It's a big fancy word of saying we dump in hops while it's still actively fermenting. What that basically does is allows us to retain more essential oils from the hops without them volatilizing out by adding them into the boil. And that just allows for more flavor and aroma. So this is Hazy Bones. Let's give it a smell and a taste. Yeah, I mean it's so good. I don't know what else to say besides it's just incredibly drinkable and delicious and tropical. And even though this is an IPA, there's a lot of people who are like, whoa, I don't drink IPAs. Or the same thing happens with Belgian wheats. Like they had a blue moon and they go like, I don't like wheat beers. That's because of that specific yeast strain that's in Belgian wheats that give different phenolics and flavor and aromas that you might not like. With IPAs, it depends on the level of bitterness, whether you like that, and also how the brewery introduces hops as an ingredient in the brewing process. The later in the process, the more flavor and aroma, and actually the less bitterness that you get. Bitterness is important because it balances out the sweetness of malt, but really, what consumers are wanting is all late edition hops, so we're all driven by flavor and aroma, less bitterness. So to me, I actually think XPA has more of a perceived bitterness level than Hazy Bones, but Hazy Bones is an IPA, technically rates on the International Bittering Units level higher than XPA. But this is what consumers want. They basically want to drink juice. So that's what kind of IPAs have turned into. And this is our Hazy Bones juice.
Yeah, it's probably got 3 times the amount of hops as the XPA, but,
Yeah.
but like Kirk said, when you try the XPA, you can really taste that hop kind of snap to it. Whereas the hop, you don't get that because of the biotransformation. You just get all the aroma and flavor from the hops and none of the bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. Which beer do you think is the most unique? I imagine this question is it with the full library of Flying Fish beer?
Well, I'll start. We did early on a Belgian Double. At the time, Belgians were a really popular style, Belgian beers in general. I mean, Belgium was kind of the Disney World of beers. There were hundreds of different styles. And it's really a complex beer. It's about 7.5%. It's great with food. It's great dessert beer. And there's not a lot of them on the market currently. So it's really we say it's like the Burgundy of beers. Used to have people come in and say, "Oh, I don't like beer." We're like, "Here, try this," and I'm like, "Oh, I don't like beer, but I really like this." So I think that's kind of helps us stand out in our portfolio. It may not get all the love as some of the IPAs, but I think it's a really solid beer that has a lot of fans.
Awesome. We have somebody listening who has a son who lives in Nevada, and she would like him to try. I'm sorry, I'm assuming the son lives in Nevada and would like to try the beers. Any distribution out there? Any plans?
So good question. Basically, the way that we manage our state footprint is we try to keep the beer to where we can comfortably sell in terms of a capacity constraint, but then also in terms of a freshness and quality perspective. Our brewery is still mid-size, but we do have national distribution through a third-party entity of Total Wine. So if I forget if Total Wine and More is located in Nevada. I'd have to check.
Oh yeah, if he's anywhere near Las Vegas, there's several of them, but they have a pretty good footprint throughout the bigger cities in Nevada. But I know in Las Vegas, there's at least 2 or 3 really big locations.
Yeah, so nationally, Total Wine does carry our product. So if anybody has a Total Wine in their area, they do carry Flying Fish. We just don't have individual wholesalers set up in those states, so you can only procure it out of a Total Wine.
Great. One more question. This is about the trend in breweries. Do you think customers are moving from hoppy IPAs towards sour beers and light lagers? Are brewers trying to compete with the spiked seltzer wave?
I mean, I'll take a stab at this. So seltzers are not going away. They are growing market share a ton. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we developed our simple hard seltzer, was because we knew that this space was growing. People want lower carbs. So this is 1 gram of carb. It's 100 calories. This has flavor combos. So there's you have a mango kiwi, a blueberry peach, a pomegranate lime, unique flavor offerings. I think craft breweries need to sell seltzer to be competitive nowadays. There was an article about Boston Beer. Boston Beer is the producer of Sam Adams. 74% of their volume came from Truly Seltzer, Twisted Tea, and Angry Orchard. So Sam Adams, their beer portfolio really is not the bulk of their business anymore. So I think it's really important, as just any, listen, this has nothing to do with like brewery. It just has to deal with marketplace and capitalism. Is whatever your customers want, if you're not offering that, then you don't have the solution to their problem. So seltzers are becoming a solve for a lot of people in terms of lifestyle and drinkability. So I think it's important to offer those. I don't think so. The original question asked, are people getting away from IPAs? No, IPA is still the #1 category. The second best-selling category in beer overall is seasonal, and seasonal can be construed as a lot of things. As Gene had mentioned, Sierra Nevada's Celebration, which is their winter IPA, it's still an IPA. So in the seasonal category, there's a lot of IPAs that fill in there. So IPAs are still going to be the #1 selling product until that market shift changes. And in sours, I think there's a place, but not so much. I used to sell Rodenbach, and I love their beer and I love their brands, but pricing and package type made it really challenging to sell. And even the type of sour that you would get from Belgium, very unique and different from American sours. And the one thing, a lot of people don't like sours because as Americans, we like to ramp up the volume knob. So the sourness and tartness is almost like warheads. Like a brand like Salt and Sea, we didn't want that because then it wouldn't be sessionable. You'd only be able to have like 1 16-ounce can and then move on because your palate is just completely drained. Session sour, the term session sour, is coined by Dogfish Head, and we elected to utilize that same exact verbiage on Salt and Sea because that's exactly what it is. It's something that's approachable, it's lower in alcohol. I think those have a really good space because it's lower in calories as well, and that sessionability rises. However, I think that seltzers are still going to dominate the space. We've also seen a lot of RTDs, so wine to go in cans. There's vodka sodas in cans and a lot of other craft cocktails in cans. That space is growing. So I'm not sure how breweries can innovate unless you're paying attention to what's going on in the marketplace and offering like-minded products that are solves for your customers. So that's why we make a hard seltzer.
Great. Well, we are just at the 6 o'clock mark, and we've gotten to pretty much all of the questions. I think this concludes our virtual tasting. So I want to send a sincere thanks to Gene and Kirk for providing such a fun education tonight on the craft beer industry and Flying Fish beers. Thank you to Steph, our Alumni Association event guru. And thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. I hope you enjoy the rest of your beers. Take care and cheers.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming to this. And by the way, our beer gardens open up outside. So if you live in the area, we have a lot of space where you can enjoy these beers fresh from the tap. Thanks.
Thank you so much, guys, for having us. We really appreciate it. And thank you for supporting us as a brewery. We've been doing really well, even with the craziness. So thank you.
Thank you. Take care.